You are no longer going to accept anything less than success, or you're going to categorize that as failure. Are you a high achiever who's having difficulty overcoming chronic pain? If so, you're going to want to watch this video and subscribe to the channel, because we'll be doing a short series of videos here which will each touch on a different aspect of why you might be struggling. In today's video, we're going to focus specifically on motivation, but before we get into the details, let's quickly define what we mean by chronic pain. So we all know what acute pain is. It's pain that comes on all of a sudden due to some sort of an injury, and there's a clear identifiable structural cause. Now on the flip side, chronic pain is pain that lasts longer than usual and can come on in a variety of circumstances. So there might be an injury or a stressful life event, but it also can have an insidious onset where it seemingly comes out of nowhere. Now, unlike acute pain, chronic pain tends to be due to neuroplastic changes in the nervous system. And what this means is that neural networks that produce pain get stronger and learn to produce pain in a number of different contexts. Now, it's important to recognize that the currency of pain in the body is fear and threat. So anytime that the nervous system is perceiving fear or threat, you're going to be more likely to strengthen these neural circuits and produce pain. Now, you'll see why this matters in a second when we talk about motivation, but I just want to offer a little disclaimer here. There's nothing wrong with being a high achiever. You're probably self-directed, goal-oriented, ambitious, and you probably take on big challenges that have a hugely positive impact, both for you and other people. Now, one of the problems here is that over time, as you achieve more and more within whatever domain you're achieving in, that motivational structure can shift. And as that motivational structure shifts, this can actually increase fear and threat in the body. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. So there are two main sources of motivation. One is orientation towards success, or this wanting to achieve, and then the other is fear of failure. And both are very strong motivators, and there's nothing inherently wrong with either one. But depending on what kind of an individual you are, you might be more biased towards one or the other, and then over time these can shift. So most people who are high achievers are either driven towards success and are incredibly success-oriented with no fear of failure, or a combination of the two. And in fact, people who are high in both tend to be what we call overstrivers, and those people are actually going to be known as being very tedious and meticulous, dotting their I's and crossing their T's and getting all the details right, and some might even call these people tryhards. Now, it's not a bad thing to be a tryhard, and in fact, in many domains, this is actually a really good thing. So if you're detail-oriented, and you're also trying to succeed at a high level, but you're afraid of making those mistakes, this can often play in your favor. However, there is a shift that goes on over time within any given domain that can then bias you towards fearing failure more than orienting towards success. Now let's break this down a little bit. So when you first start a skill, the ceiling in terms of that skill level is way up here, and the floor is down here. Now, obviously, you're going to start closer to the floor. And if you have that high success orientation, you're going to be looking up, and there's a belief that you have that if you keep working hard, you can achieve that highest level of attainment within that domain. And there's also this understanding you have that there's a high probability of failure here at the bottom because you're just starting. You don't really have the skills or the chops to be able to do this at a high level. So you can accept the failure a little bit easier here when you're in those initial stages, and you can still have this big ramp, this big wind-up period of getting towards those upper levels. Now, as you're going up and you're starting to attain more and more proficiency in a given domain, we can start to have a shift here where instead of an equal balance of fear of failure and success orientation, or more success orientation than fear of failure, that balance will actually start to shift. Because once the ceiling is here and you're real close to it, you're going to expect success as the baseline. You are no longer going to accept anything less than success, or you're going to categorize that as failure. So the potential to fail here gets much, much greater, and the potential to succeed beyond the baseline of success is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so once you reach this kind of a skill level, really it's all about making sure that you're not failing. Now, if that main motivational structure gets weighted in this way, and you happen to come into a situation where you're experiencing chronic pain or symptoms, that level of fear and threat is going to be present anytime you're doing the thing that you're achieving in. And this becomes really, really tricky because achieving that thing is often going to be what gives you the meaning out of life that you want, or the money and the income, the ability to support your family, or the ability to grow professionally. And so you're between a rock and a hard place because your motivational structure is increasing fear and threat which is making pain worse, which probably makes your entire experience, including doing that activity, much, much less fulfilling. But you have to keep doing that activity in order to keep your life going. So there's a couple of tricks to work through this imbalance. And the first is going to be to try to redefine the role that you have to then be able to take on new challenges so you can get back into that beginner's sort of a mindset where it's okay to fail. Because a lot of times if you're really high level at something and success is the baseline and you're very close to that ceiling, you really can't afford to fail within that exact context, right? It's going to be expected that you're succeeding at a certain level. And so that fear of failure might be there in those circumstances. But if you can redefine the role that you're playing slightly, or just find other avenues to explore failing in and get some exposure to that, that can actually help you to tolerate that fear of failure a little bit more. Now, going along with this, if that's not an option, what you want to do at the very least is begin to be aware of that fear of failure as the baseline motivational structure. So when that fear is there and you're not noticing it, it actually has a much more profound physiological effect. If you're able to clearly glimpse the fact that fear and threat are present, then you can start to look at it as just another appearance in consciousness. Oftentimes that'll downregulate the physiology and it'll get you out of fight or flight and into a more balanced sort of stress response. So those are just a few tips to get you started when it comes to specifically addressing the motivational structure. Now, generally speaking, the other thing you're going to want to watch out for is when you're going through the process of rehabbing yourself and recovering from a physical perspective, you want to make sure you're not putting so much pressure on that process that you then become afraid of failing in that context as well. Because if you start to apply that same motivational strategy with a high degree of fear of failure to the rehab process, you're just going to increase threat, and you might actually feel worse as you're going through the rehab process instead of increasing the probability that your body will learn not to produce pain in the context that it usually does. All right, so we'll be talking a lot more about this in the upcoming videos in this series. Hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments. Like I said before, subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when we release the rest of this series. Until next time, thanks a lot for watching. Peace.